abrupt, but sometimes necessary. Hi, everybody. This is Allison from Alley Cat Creations. How are you? I might have to monkey butt if this camera doesn't stop its nonsense. Yes, I'm a child at heart. There it goes. Hi! Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you have yet to do so. And if you get anything from my work at Connect an Epiphany, a Mind Explosion, a new book to read, a new author to explore, artwork to create, please consider supporting my work. All the links are at the bottom of the description of this video. Allylatcreations211.com is my website. You can see the pyramids I make, the paintings I do, the drawings I create, all the fun stuff that's behind me. It's on my website. And if you see anything that you like or you want something commissioned, please email me. The best way you can get in touch with me. Hi. 3D memberships is a beautiful way to support the channel. It helps me keep everything running. So if you're interested in a 3D membership, all the information should be over there in the YouTube video. But you get free entries into raffles that I do. I'm doing one this Friday. Oh, I know time linear space is warped in my brain. I'm raffling off for my birthday. My birthday's on Wednesday. I shouldn't call it that. It's Incarnation Day. Or, oh shit, I signed up for this 3D anniversary. Trying to keep it optimistic. I'm raffling this off, so channel members, you get a free entry for this pyramid. It's an $80 value. Lots of elements in there that are really pretty. And I also do channel member only videos, which is only for channel members that are 3D or higher. And I only have one tier. So they're oracle cards, and obviously it's not going to tell you your future. It's going to tell you what to work on for yourself. Blavatsky, part 5, stanza 10. I know it's a long stanza and mind blown stuff. Mind blown stuff. This one is Our Giants of Fiction. Before I get into this section, let me just say that I had an experience as in my light body, in my sleep state. I was taken to an inner earth tunnel with two interdimensional neutral beings. That is, I guess, the people working with me. And they took me through a portal point because I have a frequency key, and the frequency shifted my being into a giant, and I was Freya, or an aspect of Freya, as I went into Asgard. Um, I know it sounds banana nuts for some, but if you look at the Nos Confunden map, Nos Confunden, if you were to look at Westeros and the Game of Thrones, there's some plausibility to the theory that there is something beyond the wall. Well, why can't you go past Antarctica? Just theory, but there's a lot of reasons why hundreds of countries are having a treaty that you can't go to Antarctica. There's reasons for it. So, yeah, for those of you who are into the stuff that I'm into, it is plausible that there's things beyond the wall. And if you look at the Kali Yuga cycles and the lands beyond, Asgard's one of them, and I was taken there. And it was pretty magical and really interesting to see my other self in concurrent time space and another dimensional density of fun. Here again, we come into collision with science. The latter denies so far that man has ever been much larger than the average of the tall and powerful men one meets with occasionally now. Dr. Henry Gregor denounces such traditions as resting upon ill-digested facts. Instances called for the time immemorial, the field of giants in the lower Dauphine, France, 4 miles from St. Romans. Enormous bones were found deeply buried in the sandy soil. They are attributed to human remains and even to a chief slain by Marcius. But Clover's later research proved them to be fossil remains of an dinosaur. So I there's no way I'm reading that. I need glasses. Of the family of tapirs, 18 feet long. Ancient buildings are pointed to as an evidence that our earliest ancestors were not much larger than we are, the entrance doors being of no larger size than they are now. The tallest man of antiquity known to us was the Roman Emperor Maximus. We are told, whose height was only 7.5 feet. Nevertheless, in our modern day, we see every year men taller than this. The Hungarian who exhibited himself in the London Pavilion was nearly 9 feet high. In America, a giant was shown 9.5 feet tall. The Montenegrin Danilo was 8 feet 7 inches. In Russia and Germany, one often sees men in the lower classes above 7 feet. And as a pathology, ape theorists are told by Mr. Darwin that the species of animals which result from crossbreeding always betray a tendency to revert to the original type. They ought to apply the same law to men. Have there been no giants as a rule in ancient days, there would be none now. I'm going to pause here. Sorry, I don't normally do this during Blavatsky, but I must because I made an opening statement. Just because I went in my light body, there is evidence in this world, and even in Blavatsky's time, that people quite ignore. Why are the Vatican doors so large? What was walking through there at one point in time? When you're walking into churches, why are the doors enormous? It's not from artistic classical styles, Gothic styles, or any of the architecture that's out there. Why and who and back? Okay, so let's take a deep dive. Greek culture, architecture. How did any of these things actually reach those heights if they didn't have superior technology than we do today? The columns are still up, up, which would mean that there would be giants helping to lift those things up, unless they had very, very strong technology that lifted those columns that were carved up. It's just, there's things that people are not thinking about in everyday world that we inhibit that suggest that there was once giants. If you look at ancient cultures, you look at doorways, you look at massive stone structures, what is that alluding to? Who is walking through those Vatican doors? Ancient Egypt, why are the statues really high? Ancient China. There's so many reasons, and now the art books and all the scientists and experts, I don't deem anybody an expert in anything, Do they make sense, or are they just giving you an explanation just to give you one because that's what their research concludes and you're meant to not go within and see the truth for yourself? Sorry, had to go off on a tangent. Forward. All this applies to only the historic period, and if the skeletons of the prehistoric ages have failed so far, which is positively denied, to prove undeniably in the opinion of science that claim here advanced, it is but a question of time. Moreover, as already stated, human stature is little changed since the last racial cycle. The giants of old are all buried under the oceans, and hundreds of thousands of years of constant friction by water would reduce to dust and pulverize a brazen, far more a human skeleton. But whence the testimony of well-known classical writers and or philosophers, and men who otherwise would had the reputation for lying? Let us bear in mind, furthermore, that before the year 74, when Boucher de Perthes focused it upon the attention of science, almost nothing was known of fossil man, for archaeology complacently ignored his existence. Of giants who were in the earth in those days of old, the Bible alone had spoken to the wise men of those days. Of the West, the zodiac being the solitary witness, called upon the collaborate the statement in the persons of Atlas or Orion, whose mighty shoulders are said to support the world. Nevertheless, even the giants had not been left without their witness, and one may as well examine both sides of the question. The three sciences, geological, sidereal, and scriptural, the latter in the universal character, may furnish us with the needed proofs. To begin with geology, it has already confessed that the older the excavated skeletons, the larger, taller, and the more powerful their structure. This is already a certain proof in hand. All those bones, writes Frederic de Gregmont, who, through believing too piously in Noah's Ark and the Bible, is nonetheless a scientific witness. All those skeletons found in the departments of the Guard in Austria, Liege, those skulls which remain all of the Negro type, and which by reason of the type might be mistaken for animals, have all belonged to men of very high stature. The same is repeated by Lartet on authority, who attributes a taller stature to those who were submerged in the deluge, not necessarily Noah's, and a smaller stature to the races which lived subsequently. Atlantis. As for the evidence, Tertullian, sorry, I'm butchering these last names, who assures us that in his day a number of giants were found at Carthage. For before his testimony can be accepted, his own identity and actual existence would have to be proven. But we may turn to the scientific journals of 1858, which spoke of a sarcophagus of giants found that year on the site of the same city. As to the ancient pagan writers, who have the evidence of Philostratus, who speak of giant skeletons 22 cubits long, as well as another of 12 cubits, seen by himself at Segis. This skeleton may perhaps not have belonged to, as believed by Protilius, to the giant killed by Apollo in the siege of Troy. Nevertheless, it was that of a giant, as well as the other one discovered by Mesocrates of Cytri. I'm butchering this, sorry guys. At Lemnos, horrible to behold, according to Philostratus. It is possible that prejudice would carry science so far as to class all these men as either fools or liars. Finally, speaks of giant, in whom he thought he recognized Orion, the son of Ephialtes. Plutarch declares that Sertorius saw the tomb of Antaeus the giant, and Pausanias, whatever these names are, they're Greek, vouches for the actual existence of the tombs of Asterius and Guron, or Helios, son of Hercules, all giants, titans, and mighty men. Finally, the Abbé Pégues affirms in his curious work on the volcanoes of Greece that in the neighborhood of the volcanoes of the Isle of Thera, giants with enormous skulls were found laid out under colossal stones, the erection of which must have necessitated everywhere the use of titanic powers, and which tradition associates in all countries with the ideas about giants, volcanoes, and magic. In the same work above, cited by Abbé Pégues, the author wonders why in Bible and tradition the giants, the mighty ones, the Rephaim, or the scepters, phantoms, the Nephilim, or the fallen ones, are shown as if identical, though they are all men, since the Bible calls them the primitive and mighty ones. Nimrod, the doctrine explains the secret. These names, which belong to right only to the 4 preceding races and the earliest beginning of the 5th, allude very clearly to the first 2 phantom astral races, to the fallen one, the 3rd, and to the race of the Atlantean giants, the 4th, after which men began to decrease in stature. Bossuet sees the cause of subsequent universal idolatry in the original sin. Ye shall be as gods, says the serpent of Genesis to Eve, thus laying the first germ of the worship of false divinities. Hence, he thinks, came idolatry or the cult and adoration of images, of anthropomorphized or human figures. But if it is the latter that idolatry is made to rest upon, then 2 churches, the Greek and the Latin especially, are as idolatrous and pagan as any other religion. It is only in the 4th race that men who had lost all right to be considered divine, restored to body worship, in other words, to phallicism. Till then, they had been truly gods, as pure, as divine as their progenitors, and the expression of the allegorical serpent does not, as sufficiently shown in the preceding pages, refer to the physiological fall of men, but to their acquiring the knowledge of good and evil, which knowledge comes to them prior to their fall. It must not be forgotten that it's only after his forced expulsion from Eden that Adam knew Eve, his wife. It is not, however, by the dead letter of the Hebrew Bible that we shall check the tenets of the secret doctrine, but point out rather the great similarities between the 2 in their esoteric meaning. It is only after his deflection from the Neoplatonists that Clement of Alexandria began to translate giants by serpents, explaining that serpents and giants signify demons. We may be told that before the draw parcels between our tenets and those of the Bible, we have to show better evidence of the existence of the giants of the 4th race than the reference to them found in Genesis. We answer that the proofs we give are more satisfactory. At any rate, they belong to more literary and scientific evidence than those of Noah's deluge will ever be. Even the historical works of China are full of such reminiscence about the 4th race. In Shu King, anyone can read in the French translation when the Mao Se, the antediluvian and perverted race, explains that Anatar, which had retired in the days of old to the rocky caves, and the descendants of whom are said to be still found in the neighborhood of Canton, according to our ancient documents, have, owing to the beguilements of Tichiyu, troubled all the earth. It became full of brigands. The Lord Shang-Ti, a king of the divine dynasty, saw his people had lost the last vestiges of virtue. Then he commanded Ti Hong and Lei, two lower Daihan Kohans, to cut away every communication between the heaven and earth. Since then, there was no more going up and down. Interesting. Going up and down means an untrammeled communication and intercourse between the two worlds, not being in a position to give out a full and detailed history of the third and fourth races. As many isolated facts concerning them as are permitted must be now collated together, especially those corroborated by direct as well as by inferential evidence found in ancient literature and history. As the coats of skin of men thickened and they fell more and more into physical sin, the intercourse between physical and etherical divine man was stopped. The veil of matter between the two planes became too dense for even the inner man to penetrate. The mysteries of heaven and earth revealed to the third race by their celestial teachers in the days of their purity became a great focus of light. The rays from which became necessarily weakened as they were diffused and shed upon an uncongeal because too material soil. With the masses, they generated into sorcery, taking later on the shape of exoteric religions of idolatry, full of superstitions and man, or hero worship. Alone a handful of primitive men in whom the spark of divine wisdom burnt bright, and only strengthened in its intensity as it got dimmer and dimmer with every age, and those who turned it to bad purpose. Remain the elect custodians of the mysteries revealed to mankind by the divine teachers. They were those among them who remained in their Quranic condition from the beginning, and tradition whispers what the secret teachings affirm, namely that these elect were the germ of hierarchy, which never died since the period. The inner man of the first only changes his body from time to time. He is ever the same, knowing neither rest nor nirvana, spurning devachan and remaining constantly on earth for the salvation of mankind. Out of the 7 virgin men, Kumara, 4 sacrificed themselves for the sins of the world and the instruction of the ignorant, to remain till the end of the present Manvarata. Though unseen, they are ever present. When people say of one of them, he is dead, behold, he is alive and under another form. These are the head, the heart, the soul, and the seed of undying knowledge. Thou shalt never speak, O Lanu, of the generations, before a multitude mentioning them by their names. The wise alone will understand. It is these sacred 4 who have been allegoricized and symbolized in the Linga Purana, which states that Vamadeva Siva, as Kumara, is reborn in each Kapla race in the instance as 4 youths, 4 white, 4 red, 4 yellow, 4 dark or brown. Let us remember that Siva is preeminently and chiefly as aesthetic, the patron of all yogis and adepts. The allegory will become quite comprehensible. It is the spirit of divine wisdom and chaste aestheticism itself which incarnates in these elect. It is only after getting married and being dragged by the gods from his terrible aesthetic life that Rudra becomes Siva, a god, and not one of very virtuous or merciful type in the Hindu pantheon. Higher than the 4 is only one, on earth as in heavens, the still more mysterious solitary being described in Book 1. We have now to examine the nature of the sons of the flame and the dark wisdom, as well as the pros and cons of the satanic assumption. Oh boy! Yay! Such broken sentences as could be made out of the fragments on the tile, which George Smith calls the curse after the fall, Chaldean account of Genesis, are of course allegorical, yet they corroborate that which is taught of the true nature of the fall of the angels in our books, excuse me. Thus it is said in line 12 that the Lord of the earth, his name called out, the Father Elohim, and pronounced his curse, which the god Hea heard, and his liver was angry, because his man, angelic man, had corrupted his purity, for which Hea expresses the desire that wisdom and knowledge hostilely, may they injure him. Man, like I said, I need glasses, and I don't know when I'm going to get them. The latter sentence points to the direct connection of the Chaldean with the genetic account. When Hea tries to bring to naught the wisdom and knowledge gained by man through his newly acquired intellectual and conscious capacity of creating in his turn, thus taking the monopoly of creation out of the hands of God, the gods, the Elohim do the same in the 3rd chapter of Genesis. Therefore, the Elohim sent him out of Eden. But this was of no avail, for the spirit of divine wisdom being upon and in man, verily the serpent of eternity in all knowledge, that Manasaic spirit, which made him learn the secret of creation on I don't know how to say that name, and of procreation on the earthly planes, led him as naturally to discover his ways to immortality, notwithstanding the jealousy of all the gods. The early Atlanto-Lemurians are charged with taking unto themselves divine incarnations, wives of a lower race, namely the race of the hereto mindless man. Every ancient scripture has the same, more or less, disfigured legend. Primarily the angelic fall, which has transformed the firstborn of God into the Asuras, or into the Ahriman and Typhon of the pagans, if the accounts given in the Book of Enoch and in Hermes, in Puranas and Bible are taken literally, when esoterically means simply this. Sentences such as, in his Satan's ambition, he raises his hand against the sanctuary of the God of heaven, ought to be read. Prompted by the law of eternal evolution and karma, the angel incarnated on earth in man. And as his wisdom and knowledge are still divine, although his body is earthly, he is allegorically accused of divulging the mysteries of heaven. I agree with that latter statement. He combines and uses the two for purpose of humans instead of superhuman procreation. Henceforth, man will beget, not create. But as by so doing, he has used his work, his weak body, as the means of procreation, the body will pay the penalty for this wisdom, carried from heaven down to the earth. Hence, the corruption of physical purity will become a temporary curse. The medieval Kabbalists knew this well, since one of them did not fear to write the Kabbalah, was first taught by God himself to the select company of angels who formed a Theosophic school in paradise. After the fall, the angels most graciously communicated his heavenly doctrine to the disobedient child of earth, to furnish the proclast with the means of returning to their pristine nobility and felicity. This shows how the event of the sons of God marrying and imparting the divine secrets of heaven to the daughters of men, allegorically told by Enoch and in the 6th chapter of Genesis, was interpreted by the Christian Kabbalists. The whole of this period may be regarded as the pre-human period, that of divine man, or as plastic Protestant theology now has it, the pre-Adamic period. But even Genesis begins its real history by the giants of those days and the sons of God marrying and teaching their wives, the daughters of man. This period is the one described in the Puranas and relating as it does to the days lost in archaic ages, hence prehistoric. How can any anthropologist feel certain whether that mankind of that period was not as he knows it now? The whole personal of the Brahmins and Puranas, the Rishis, the Padis, Manus, the wives and progeny belong to their pre-human period. Well, these are the seed of humanity, so to speak. It is around these sons of God, the mind-born, astral children of Brahma, that our physical frames have grown and developed to what they are now. For the Puranic histories of all these men are those of the monads in their various and numberless incarnations on this and other spheres. Events perceived by the Siva eye of the ancient seers, the third eye of our stanzas, and described allegorically. Later on, they were disfigured for sectarian purposes, mutilated, but still left with a considerable groundwork of truth in them. Nor is the philosophy less founded in such allegories for being so thickly veiled by the overgrowth of fancy. We never fell. We fell into matter, but we never, the fall means evil in so many brains, and it's not, in my estimation at least. But with the fourth race, we reached the purely human period. Those were here to semi-divine beings, self-imprisoned in bodies, which were human only in appearance, became physiologically changed and took unto themselves wives who were entirely human and fair to look at, but in whom lower and more material, though sidereal beings had incarnated, these beings in female form. Lilith is a prototype of these in the Jewish tradition, are called in the esoteric accounts Kato, Dakini in Sanskrit. Allegorical legends call the chief of these Liliths, plural, Sangui Kato, Buddha Dakini in Sanskrit, all credited with the art of walking in the air and the greatest kindness to mortals, but no mind, only animal instinct. This is the beginning of a worship which ages later was doomed to degenerate into phallicism and sexual worship. It began by the worship of the human body, the miracle of miracles, as an English author calls it, and ended by that of the respective sexes. The worshippers were giants in stature, but they were giants in knowledge and learning, though it came to them more easily than it does to the men of our modern times. Their science was innate in them. The Lemuro Atlantean had no need of discovering and fixing in his memory that which his informing principle knew at the moment of its incarnation. Time alone, and ever-growing obtuseness of the manner in which the principles had clothed themselves, could the one weaken the memory of their prenatal knowledge, the other blunt and even extinguish every spark of the spiritual and divine in them. Therefore, had they formed the first fallen victims to their animal natures and bred monsters, men of distinct varieties from themselves. Speaking of the giants, Fraser, I don't know how to say that last name, describes them well in saying that those children of heaven and earth was endowed at their birth by the sovereign powers the authors of their being, with extraordinary faculties, both moral and physical. They commanded the elements, knew their secrets of heaven and the earth, of the sea, and the whole world, and read purity in the stars. Hang on, guys, I have to adjust the screen. Hi, everybody. I had to adjust my seating position because I can't see. Now you get to see my eyes shift. Fun times. The pupils. It seems indeed as though one has to deal with reading of them, not with men as we are, but with the spirits of the elements sprung from the bosom of nature and having all sway over her. All these beings are marked with the character of magic and sorcery. And so they were, those now legendary heroes of the prehistoric, still once really existing races, was wise in his generation, for he did not charge with deliberate deceit or dullness or superstition. An endless series of recognized philosophers who mention these races and assert that even in their own time they saw their fossils. There were skeptics in days of old, no fewer, as great as they are now. But even in Lucian, Democritus, and Epicurus yield to the evidence of facts and shown the discriminative capacity of really great intellects, which can distinguish fiction from fact and truth from exaggeration and fraud. Ancient writers were no more fools than our modern wise men are. As for well remarked by the author of some notes on Aristotle's philosophy in relation to modern thought, I can't get rid of this allergy stuff. The common division of history into ancient and modern is misleading. The Greeks in the 4th century BC were in many respects moderns, especially we may add in their skepticism. They were not very likely to accept fables so easily. Yet the Lemurians and the Atlanteans, those children of heaven and earth, were indeed marked with the character of sorcery, for the esoteric doctrine charges them precisely with that, which, if believed, would put an end to the difficulties of science with regard to the origin of man, or rather his anatomical similarities to the anthropod ape. It accuses them of having committed the, to us, abominable crime of breeding with so-called animals, and thus producing a truly pithecoid species now extinct. Of course, as in the question of spontaneous generation, in which esoteric science believes, which it teaches that possibility of such a crossbreed between man and an animal of any kind will be denied. But apart from the consideration that in those early days, as already remarked, neither the human Atlantean giants nor yet the animals were the physiological perfect man or mammalians that are now known to us, the modern notions upon this subject. Those are the Jesus. We know what I mean. Include are too uncertain and fluctuating to permit them an absolute denial a priori of such a fact. A careful perusal of the commentaries would make one think that the being that the new incarnate bred with was called an animal, not because he was no human being, but rather because he was so dissimilar physically and mentally to the more perfect races, which had developed physiologically all an earlier period. Remember stanza 7 and what it said in the first verse, that when the sons of wisdom came to incarnate the first time, some of them incarnated fully, others projected into the forms only a spark, which some of the shadows were left over from the being filled and perfected till the 4th race. Those races, then, which remained destitute of knowledge, of those again which were left mindless, remain as they were even after the natural separation of the sexes. It is these who committed the first crossbreeding, so to speak, and bred monsters, and it is from the descents of these that the Atlanteans chose their wives. Adam and Eve were supposed, with Cain and Abel, to be the only human family on earth. Yet we see Cain going to the land of Nod and taking there a wife. Evidently, one race only was supposed perfect enough to be called human. And even in our own day, while the Sinhalese regard the Vedas of their jungles as speaking animal and no more, some British people believe firmly in their arrogance that every other human family, especially the dark Indians, is an inferior race. Moreover, than all naturalists who have sincerely considered the problem whether some savage tribes like the Bushmen, for instance, can be regarded as men at all. The commentary says in describing the species or race of animals fair to look at as a biped, having human shape but having the lower extremities from the waist down covered with hair. Hence the race of the satyrs, perhaps. If man existed 2 million years ago, they must have been just the animals were quite different physical. Sorry, guys. Physically, I got it out, and anatomically from what they have become, and they were neither then to the type of pure mammalian animal than are now. Anyhow, we learned that the animal world breeds strictly inter se, in accordance with genius and species, only since the appearance on this earth of the Atlantean race, as demonstrated by the author of the able work, Modern Science and Modern Thought. This idea of the refusal to breed with another species or the sterility is the only result of such breeding. Appears to be a prima facie deduction rather than an absolute law, even now. He shows that different species do, in fact, often breed together, as may be seen in the familiar instance of the horse and ass. Donkey. It is true that in this case, the mule is sterile, but this rule is not universal, and recently one new hybrid race, that of the leopard or hare rabbit, has been created which is perfectly fertile. The progeny of wolf and dog is also instanced as that of several other domestic animals, like foxes and dogs, again, and the modern Swiss cattle shown by Rudemeyer as descended from 3 distinct species of fossil oxen. Yet some of these species, as the ape family, which is so clearly resembles man in physical structure, contain, we are told, numerous branches which graduate into one another, but the extremes of which differ more widely than man does from the highest of the ape series, the gorilla and chimpanzee, for instance. Thus, Mr. Darwin's remark, or shall we say the remark of Linus, natura non facti saltium, is not only corroborated by esoteric science, but were there any chance of the real doctrine being accepted by any others than its direct volunteers, reconcile in more than one way, if not entirely. The modern evolution theory, with facts, as also with the absolute failure of the anthropologies, can't get that out, guys, with my teeth, to meet with the missing link in our 4th round geological formations. We will show elsewhere that, however, unconsciously to itself, modern science pleads our case upon its own admission, and that the quadriphage is perfectly right when he suggests that in his last work that it is far more likely that the anthropod ape should be discovered to be the descendant of man than that these 2 types should have a common fantastic and nowhere to be found ancestor. Thus, the wisdom of the compilers of the old stanzas is vindicated by at least one eminent man of science, and the occultists preferred to believe, as he ever had Man was the first and highest mammalian animal that appeared in his fourth round creation. Then came still hunger animals, and last of all, the dumb man who walks on all fours. For the Rakshas, giant demons, and Devya titans of the White Dwarpa continent spoiled the dumb man's sires. Commentary. Sorry, guys, I'm having a hard time with my mouth today. Furthermore, as we see, there are anthropologists who have traced man back to an epoch which goes far to break down the apparent barrier that exists between the chronologies of modern science and the archaic doctrine. It is true that the English scientists generally have declined to commit themselves to the sanction of the hypothesis of even a tertiary man. They each and all measure the antiquity of Homo pregenius by their own lights and prejudices. Huxley indeed ventures to speculate as a possible Prolocene or Malocene man. I'm not saying those words right. Professor Seaman and Mr. Grant Allen have regulated his advent to the Essene or Enochian, but seeking generally English scientists who consider that we cannot safely go beyond the quaternary. Unfortunately, the facts do not accommodate the too cautious reserve of these latter. The French School of Anthropology, basing their views on the discoveries of, I don't know how to say this French name, Capellini. There's more to that, way more to that. And others have accredited almost without exception the doctrine that the traces of our ancestors are certainly to be found in the Miocene, while M. de Quatrefages now inclines to postulate a secondary age man. Further on, we shall compare such estimates with the figures given in the Brahmanical esoteric books, which approximate to the esoteric teachings. Then the third eye acted no longer, says the stanza, because man had sunk too deep into the mire of matter. What is the meaning of the strange and weird statement in verse 42 concerning the third eye of the third race, which had died and acted no longer? A few more occult teachings must now be given with reference to this point, as well as some others. The history of the third and fourth races must be amplified in order that we may throw some more light on the development of our present humanity and show how the faculties called into activity by occult training restore man to the position he previously occupied in reference to spiritual perception and consciousness. But the phenomenon of the third eye has to be explained. And we're going to end it here, guys. Because this is very lengthy. Very lengthy. So, part 5, here we are. Part 6 incoming. So, thank you all for joining me today. I have to write a post-it before I lose all my post-its. It's going to be interesting because I'm going to talk about the third eye. But just to go back into what she was saying about the fall earlier in the other stanza, we fell into matter. We densified down. We that's how we fell. We were with God and then we became matter. That's a fall. If you want to think of it in terms of scientific sense, we fell into matter. the duality that we experience with Satan, God said, let there be. We're all once a part of God. All is source. All is omnipresent and omnipotent. So it's just an illusion here in 3D to learn. Take that as you will. She's giving you a lot of insights and hints, but a lot of people detest her work because it's theosophy. It's a label. Stop labeling things. Take what hits here in the heart and know it for yourself. Everybody's perception of reality is different. And she's just giving you some insight. So it's amazing. Amazing. Sending you each love, light, compassion, grace, shielding, and protective energy. Please go within, be the shoulder, be the lighthouse, seed your truths, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your abundance. You're all very, so much appreciated. We love you. I love you. Light the path forward. Until the next one, guys. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.